Hello, Warlords. Welcome to Saga Thursday. I'm your host, Rodge, as always. Today, we're chatting with Mr. Chris, all the way from Poland. First met him in the spotlight, and he's coming back to talk to us about the Spanish in the Age of Crusades. So, thanks for coming on, Chris. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing good. It's just a nice summer's day over here in Poland. So yeah, just hanging out, playing some Saga, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome.
So thanks for having me on.
So we've been talking a little Age of Magic before we started here, but have you been getting in some games with the Spanish? Are these your go-to for Age of Crusades?
Yeah, they're currently the only faction that I play for Age of Crusades. I've thought of maybe changing things up a bit, adapting them to try and play them as Crusaders at some point, but mostly just trying to get in as many games with the Spanish as possible. We actually had an Age of Crusades event in Poznan last weekend, so got a few games in then as well.
Cool, great. So, what drew you to the Spanish initially? Here, I'm curious.
I guess it was two things with me. For one thing, I liked the sort of the hit and run partisan tactics ethos of the faction. I was already playing Welsh at the time, and so it was sort of figured it was going to be similar. Also, thought it would be interesting to try a mostly cavalry faction. But the other thing is I've read up on the history behind the faction a fair bit, and the history is fascinating. So I think the Spanish really sort of exemplify the truth that the Crusades period was not this sort of monolithic struggle of one side against the other, Christians versus Muslims. In the case of Spain, it was very complicated. You had fragmented Christian states,
sure.
fragmented
alliances,
and it's complicated. Yeah. So, and also because of that, you can have a really colorful, really multicultural force. I mean, I joke that my army could quite easily pass for a Moorish army if I needed it to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I always picture these guys being extremely colorful for whatever reason. So in first edition, I get kind of confused after going through all these. Did these guys get much love? Now, were they really kind of a poor faction or limited back then? I guess I'm kind of confusing the Crusades factions. How did they stack up in first edition?
I mean, I didn't get that many games in with them in first edition, but I think I got one or two tournaments in with them. But I think the main thing was, I think they were similar to how they are now, in the sense that they're tricky to learn. They had a steep learning curve. You had to really learn how to make them work. You had to combine multiple abilities on the battle board, and you had to get kind of creative with them. So they were, I think, they were considered the most difficult faction to learn in the last one.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, going into second edition here, I did take a look at the board, everything before. It looks, I think you got something to work with here. So let's get into the troop types here, if you like. So the Warlord and Hearthguards are mounted on horses. No options there. The Warriors can be on foot. They can be mounted. If they are mounted, they will always have javelins. And in parentheses, either unites. Is that how you pronounce that?
It's jinetes.
Jinetes. All right.
The J is pronounced like a H in Spanish.
Okay, cool. And then for the levies, they can have bows or javelins, and up to one unit can exchange bows for crossbows. So we do have some shooting abilities on the board, and there are a couple abilities that specifically mention the javelins, so could also affect the levy as well. So as we're going through the board, kind of thinking about it, is there Are you taking a little bit of everything when you play, or what do you favor?
Yeah, you kind of have to. This is when I was playing before FAQ, but you have to take, if you're going to take Jinetes, you have to take quite a lot of them to make it worthwhile to be able to do anything with them. So I usually take 3 points of those guys. I take a point of levy with crossbows, just because they're, plunk them in a terrain somewhere in the middle of the board, and try and make sure you're shooting with them every turn, and they can be pretty nasty. Then you need something. You need either like a warlord or hearth guards or mercenaries to have to have some striking power. So kind of have to balance it. You have to take a bit of everything.
Okay. So for your Jinetes, how big are those units? Just 3 units at 8, or how do you like to? Okay.
How I've played them the last few times was I think it was 2 units of 7 and 2 units of 5. The idea was to maximize attack dice with the javelins in particular, but I think a better option would be to have, for example, one big unit of 10 or 12, and then 3 smaller units that just going to run around, run interference, that sort of thing. Sure. And then one that's got proper striking power to it.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good setup as we go into the battle board, which at the top here we're actually a little different than the standard setup, which is quite cool. So in the Hearthguard spot, you can activate a mounted unit. So that could presumably be your mounted warriors as well. And then using the uncommon and rare to activate, you have your peons, which is a foot unit with peone.
Peones, I think.
Peones, which would be your levies, and then also if you do take some foot warriors, they would fall under that as well. And then in the third spot, which has been freed up, can you tell us about Iberia? So this is a basic activation, so it can be used multiple times.
Yeah, so Iberia, again, you trigger this ability after an enemy movement or shooting activation's been resolved. And then you activate one of your Jinetes units to move or shoot. So, this ability was absolutely... this ability was really quite a killer in before last year's FAQ, because you could move and then shoot with javelins in your opponent's turn. But that went away in post FAQ.
Yeah.
But
so you can still shoot. Obviously, it's just you'll be stationary. Yeah, you won't be scooching away.
Yeah, basically. This is really useful when your opponent isn't going to be able to reach you with a charge in one activation. Because then they can... So this is in a situation where, for example, an infantry unit is more than M away. They're going to take their first activation to move up to you. You can shoot at them, maybe knock 1 or 2 figures out of the unit before the combat, and then fight, or potentially just let them run up to your Jinetes and then just get out of there. But it is a bit situational, but if used correctly, it can be really good.
Yeah, so it is an uncommon and a rare, and actually I made a mistake before on Peones. I think I said it was an uncommon and a rare for that one. It's actually a common and a rare. So you can actually activate your levy with common dice, that sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, if you're trying to make sure that your crossbows get to shoot every turn, then the battle board allows that. Basically, the Spanish are very Spanish units are very easy to activate overall, because you can activate. I mean, the only dice you actually really need to spend on activations in your turn are commons. So that's really sweet.
Yeah, that is really sweet. And so Iberia uses your uncommons, your rares. So is this more situational? Do you always have 1 or 2 dice loaded on here when you play, or not really?
Honestly, it's not an ability I use very often. Again, I'm still learning, still figuring it out, so I'm sure it's possible to get a bit more use out of it, but it's really only worth having if you know your opponent is going to do something like move up to you and then try and charge, or, for example, move up to you and then throw javelins or shoot composite bows or something like that. So that's when this ability comes in handy.
Sure. And if I think I remember the last time I did this review with Monte in first edition, he liked to use this ability, the equivalent of it. You could save it towards the end of their phase, when they don't have any dice left, their last activation, and then just move forward and set yourself up on your turn to put yourself in striking distance at some unit that has been left exposed or something like that.
Yeah, that could also work.
So it doesn't necessarily they trigger to move towards one of your units. That doesn't mean that unit has to be active. You could be a completely different unit on the other side of the battlefield, that's unrelated to the unit that triggered. So there's no range or anything like that. So very cool. Yeah. Great little ability there. Combat bonus looks the same. Activation pool as well.
Yep. Same thing.
So I'm going to pop down. We'll get into the board proper here with Hidalgos. This is a shooting activation, or shooting ability that you use during a shooting activation. Your attack dice get a +1 bonus for each fatigue the target of your shooting attack currently has. So if they have 3 fatigues, that would be amazing, as you would get a +3 to hit, and depending what you're shooting at, you could auto hit. You could get a +4 on your little six shots there, auto hitting. This is a uncommon dice, and you should have plenty of these kicking about if you're using your commons to activate. So this is a cool ability. This kind of ability where I would set it up everything just to use this and shoot at a +3. So
yeah, it's definitely one of those units where, again, especially if you've got enemy units that have got a fatigue on them and are in range of your crossbows, if you've got a dice on this unit, they're probably gonna stay as far away from you as possible.
Yeah.
To basically wipe out a 2-point unit of mounted Hearthguard in one shooting phase. I think I had a game against Saracens where they had 1 or 2 fatigues on them, and just the crossbows fired a volley into them and didn't wipe out the unit, but I think they were reduced to like 2 or 3 figures or something like that.
Well, definitely, it's almost the kind of ability that you would like modify your battle plan just to avoid being fatigued within range of crossbows. So even if you don't, even if you never use this, it's still affecting their game plan and could be working in your favor, I think, for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that you have to realize about the Spanish is that it's very much a control faction. You're winning by controlling the way your opponent plays. You don't have like a lot of abilities that give you a direct benefit right away. You have to, combine the abilities with like another ability or a certain specific certain circumstance on the field. But you also have a lot of possibilities for sort of psychological warfare with your opponent, because they can see that you have something like Hidalgos and it's gonna do damage to them.
Yeah, and I should say this is the first of, I don't know, 5, 6, or 7 abilities that have an interaction with fatigue, cause fatigue, or utilize fatigue on both sides. So this is going to be a fatigue management game against the Spanish here.
Yeah, exactly.
So
okay. I don't know. I think that's about all I can say with that one. It's a lot of fun to use. I will say that.
Yeah, hitting with dice is good, but then it is shooting. So even though you automatically hit 6 times, they could hit 5 out of 6 4+ or something like So I'm sure for every grand volley you put out, every one just kind of sloughs. Every once in a while, it just doesn't do anything as good old shooting can do.
Yeah, it's always quite literally a toss of the dice, but as the more dice you can chuck towards your opponent and the more hits you can cause, the more likely things are that they'll fail their saves and things will go your way.
So absolutely. Do you want to pop down to stunned?
Yeah, sure. So this one's, you spend a rare die. It's activation reaction, so use it in your opponent's phase after they activate one of their units. And so if the target unit is activated for a charge or shooting attack while it has at least 1 fatigue, remove a fatigue and cancel its activation. So pretty nice. What really sells it, though, is the second part. The unit may not be activated again this turn. So let's say you've got an opponent with a 8 strong unit of mounted Hearthguard. They do a couple of moves, and that they move twice, and then with their then get a fatigue, and then with their third activation they want to charge in. You remove the fatigue, and they're just sitting exposed in the middle of the board, and ready for you to lay into them in your turn. It's a thing of beauty.
Yeah, it definitely reminds of the pagan Rus ability, just shutting down a unit, canceling activation. So the first part, essentially you could cancel an activation for 1 fatigue instead of 2, like you normally could. But it's that second part there that can't be activated again this turn.
That makes it worth a risk.
Great ability for rare. Very tough on war bands that are split between their warriors and Hearthguard, and they have to commit to using the warriors or the Hearthguard. And okay, I guess you put your 3 dice on the Hearthguard. Whatever strike you had planned isn't going to go anywhere, and those dice are useless because the rest of your units are warriors or something like that. So you can exactly. Certain war bands is going to be pretty darn gnarly, but pretty gnarly against everybody, I would say.
Especially if you can use this on one of if your opponent's got several units grouped together, and one of them, the unit at the head of the column, as it were, or at the head of the formation, is charging at you. You cancel their activation, lock them down, and all of a sudden you've sort of thrown their entire formation to disarray.
Yeah, and there really isn't any way to avoid it, really. I mean, once you're going in multiple activations, there aren't a lot of abilities that can remove the fatigue kind of midway through to try and avoid this. So you're just going to have to deal with it, playing against it.
I mean, I guess the only way to deal with it is hope your opponent doesn't, hope the Spanish player isn't rolling, 6s on his Saga dice. So, there are games, as we've all seen, where that happens. Desperately
trying to get that rare for a stunt and perhaps never shows.
Yeah.
So
and then you have another game where you manage to, get a cup.
It's 2 per turn, guaranteed.
There's one after, one turn after another. So the dice are fickle.
Okay. Well, I'm going to pop down to Jinetes. This is 2 uncommons. This is Orders abilities. So make sure you don't forget to use it before you start activating your guys. Little pro tip there. Yep. Choose one of... so actually, and this is the one that's been fact.
Yeah.
So
it's now been fact twice.
Oh, okay. Well,
because it was so because you choose one of your mounted units armed with javelins until the end of the turn, the unit's movement activations are free. This is how it was in version 2.0 before the FAQ.
Okay.
So until the end of the turn, the unit's movement activations are free. The unit's targets reduce their armor by 1 during shooting attacks. This unit may only fire once at each enemy unit during this turn. So this ability was severely nerfed with the last FAQ, and then was sort of rehabilitated with this one.
The javelins. Not being able to shoot after every move for free. So you would have to
mention additional dice to. You had to burn additional dice to do additional shooting activation.
Yeah, as you went along the line there. So you'd still have to spend like 2 dice for this, and then like 3 dice if you wanted to shoot 3 times, presumably, or something like that. So,
and you're also accumulating additional fatigue. You're accumulating fatigue for each additional shooting activation.
Mm-hmm. So
where with the most recent FAQ, now the movement and shooting activations are free. So that's pretty sweet. It means you're still accumulating fatigue, but you're not burning extra dice anymore. So that's pretty cool. And you can still only fire once at each target, so you can't just ride up to one unit and double shot them and then ride back. But the other thing is now at the end of your activation phase, you remove a fatigue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
so that's pretty
nice little buff there. This is probably the longest saga ability of text. 'Cause each one is like distinct. It's not. There's like a lot going on in this ability here to go through. So.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I mean, it's a fun ability. I think you have to have a pretty large unit of jinetes to take advantage of it, because you're not going to do a whole lot shooting with three dice. Even 4 dice, you're probably only going to knock off 1 or 2 models.
Mm-hmm.
If you can get like a unit that's even 9 or 10 models strong, so you're chucking 5 attack dice at them, that's or 12 models and 6 attack dice, that's when you could really do some damage.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then you could combine that with Hidalgos for plus 1 hit for one of those, at least really hammer 1 unit. But yeah, I think it's cool. It's just imagery of 1 unit just kind of riding along, just pummeling the front lines and riding back, and then they're kind of out of the game for a turn or 2 to shed those fatigues, but you're already 1 step closer to getting back in the fray with the latest FAQ update. So that's interesting. They just made it better. So, okay, yeah, I don't have anything further to say about that one. But so you are using two uncommon dice, and you're probably going to get 2 or 3 activations out of it. So I think it needed a little something there to make it a little bit more worthwhile. But so are you like popping this every turn here? Is this the cornerstone of the plan? What
this would be something that you do a couple of times per game, because you do it is 2 dice, and you do need to make sure that you've got dice to do other things. But it's plus, especially if you've only got 1 unit that's got real striking power, then you're gonna ride up take assuming you ride up to one unit, fire, ride over to another unit, fire, and then ride back to your lines. You'll end the turn with 3 fatigue, take 1 off because of the ability, and they'll still be, you'll have to rest them at least once before you can do anything with them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, it's something that's a bit situational. You have to make sure you have 2 enemy units relatively close to each other that are within striking distance of one of your units of jinetes to pull this one off.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be really nasty against cavalry, especially cavalry warriors.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and then the other thing too is you have to target multiple units. So, as far as decisiveness, you're kind of just spreading out. Pluck in a couple models off here and there, which shooting it seems always better just to target one unit and then follow it up with a hammer. So this is kind of just across the board doing some damage here and there. So yeah, I could see maybe mixed effectiveness on this, but yeah, very cool ability. Thematic, I think. So you want to pop up to battle weary there?
Mm-hmm.
Weary.
Yeah, battle weary.
Mm-hmm. You want to read that one?
Sure. So that's a melee or a shooting reaction ability. So yeah, either in melee or when your opponent shoots at you. All units which roll more than 8 attack dice suffer a fatigue after the entire shooting attack or melee has been resolved and cannot be activated again this turn. And that's for a common die. So this is another one of those.
Another one.
It's another one of those. It's another one of those abilities that lets you take. Let's say your opponent has their sort of prize strike unit, like they charge in looking to make a mess of you, and they get a fatigue, which you can use to buff your armor or reduce theirs, or deflate on them, and then after that melee, they're stuck. They can't be activated again that turn. So, I use this in one game. I use this when I think an opponent. I was playing Militis Christi against them. My opponent had a unit of 8 Hearthguard. He charged one of my units. I forgot which one, but I think he had a fatigue when he charged in. He immediately got another one when I used this ability on him, and he took a third one at the end of the combat. So he had his prize unit of 8 Hearthguard sitting in the middle of the field, surrounded by my units, exhausted. So it was, they took, and I'm pretty sure I followed it up with a volley from my crossbowman.
Most certainly.
I'm not sure. Possibly Hidalgos right afterwards.
That's nasty. So there's a couple qualifiers on it. So if the opponent is matching up against one of your good Hearthguard units, big ones, it's all units which roll. So it could be both of you, presumably. Yeah. Which would make you not want to use this ability, potentially. And then it's the 8 attack dice, which most units you want to fight with, you want to have more than 8 attack dice. So this could potentially cause someone to close ranks, perhaps, if they want to avoid triggering this ability. I'm trying to follow the sequence here. Yeah.
You have to because you decide to close ranks. You could close ranks to preempt this ability.
Yeah, if you're charging in, you could see this seems more like a defensive type melee ability, obviously. But on your turn, if you want to somehow get that extra fatigue on there to trigger, tip the scales to exhausted, perhaps, or something like that, you definitely could.
Okay. recalling now, I think when I use this, the most when I really use this to good effect, it was when my opponent had a unit of 8 Hearthguard,
Yeah.
and he charged my Warlord. So my Warlord had exactly 8 dice, whereas he had 16. So my Warlord didn't didn't suffer the additional fatigue, whereas his unit did.
Yeah, so it's more than 8. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, or you can just, you can also, for example, you could use one of your small units of Kinet as a sort of a speed bump. They get charged, most likely wiped out, but you've then got your opponent's unit is then stuck in the middle, potentially very vulnerable for a counter attack.
Yeah. So
yeah,
a lot of uses here. Perhaps some limitation, but it's just the common dice to use it. So
it's very nice.
Yeah, we can see between the battle weary, stunned, Iberia. This is one where your opponent's going to have to just have multiple avenues of attack here in order to get at you. And as the late game against Spanish just has to be horrible because you only have like 1 or 2 units left to deliver the punch, and you've got a couple tools here to just shut it down. So,
well, it's one of those things. It can go either way. I mean, it really depends on how much of a dent you're able to put in your opponent's units earlier on in the game. Like if you've, for example, if you've got, especially the configuration I run, if I've got like 3 units of 4 or 5 jinetes, if those units have lost a couple of figures and they're no longer generating a saga die, that's not great. But if I can keep those units alive at the end, and my opponents, got units that like warriors or levies that aren't generating a saga die anymore, then that gives me a bit of an advantage. So it can really, as always, it can go either way.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's keep moving along here. So I'm going to pop down to Desperate Maneuvers. This is another melee or shooting reaction. You can use a common or an uncommon die. The enemy unit suffers a fatigue straight out, but they do get two attack dice. So depending what's going on, that might be a decent trade.
Yeah, it can be. I think I think psychologically you're always going to be resistant to using it feels like you're giving your opponent something. But actually, it can end up being a pretty good trade because let's say, you've got your, the statistics I reckon could play out. I think this is probably one of those things that's more valuable the more attack dice your opponent's rolling, because
absolutely,
if they've seen attack dice and they're hitting you on 5s, let's say they're hitting your warlord, then but if you give them a fatigue, bump your armor up to 6, and all of a sudden they're only hitting you on 6s, then you're definitely giving yourself better odds of survival. So and it's cheap, but yeah, I mean, it could also be useful if you've got again, like for example, a small unit of jinetes you're using as a speed bump, and they're going to die anyway.
Yeah, there's like one or 2 guys left. He's going to go down anyways.
Your opponent another fatigue, and they'll be stuck after that combat. So
as an Anglo-Dane player, I'm jealous of these fatigue shenanigans going on here. I like them.
Yes.
So one other thing too is, again, certain factions, it's definitely possible that they may be capped out as far as attack dice too. So if they're at the double amount, it's possible they could not get any more. So the timing of things could play into that as well.
Yeah.
But
yeah, sure. But yeah, I mean, I reckon so. I mean, it really would would depend on the situation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what I would need to check into is that if your opponent being unable to get those additional attack dice, if that cancels the ability.
Oh, true. With the fact stuff, yeah, you might want to go back and revisit that wording. Yeah. That is a good point.
Because I think the FAQ indicated that if, like in some cases, if you have two effects like that combined, so gain X number of attack dice, if you can't, or gain X number of saga dice, if you can't gain exactly the amount that's specified, then you the ability. But
yeah, like if you must activate 2 units, and for whatever reason you can't, then you can't use the ability. For this one, for attack dice, I would agree with your interpretation. They probably have to take it, but then when I'm going back thinking about, if you read through that, what I think it says is you just discard any extra dice over the double amount.
True.
We'd have to go back and look at it. So just keep that in mind.
There aren't going to be that many cases where that happens.
Vikings, Scots, maybe, which they're in the Dark Ages. So what are you even doing and even playing against those guys? I don't know.
Also, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, let's move on. Some interesting tidbits there to savor, but let's get through this. Blazing Sun. Sounds cool.
Yeah.
Can you describe it to us, Chris?
Sure. So, Blazing Sun, this is you spend 1 common die on this one. This is used during one of your shooting activations. You discard all of your attack dice, and the enemy unit targeted suffers a fatigue.
Just take a fatigue. Just take it. Whether you're obviously discarding 6 attack dice would be quite foolish, but 1 attack dice, I think that is a very good trade. Even two or 3, depending what if you're shooting a hurt guard, something like that. Absolutely. Wow. With all this going on, you definitely a lot of ways to get someone too exhausted very quickly, it seems, if they're not careful, or you just want it to happen and you're going to make it happen.
The 2 things so this is useful. Let's say you take a small unit of jinetes, ride up, throw your javelins, toss a fatigue onto the enemy unit, and run away, and then, for example, shoot them with your crossbow. That's a cool combo that you could use, or leave it so that they, or leave the fatigue on them so that they have to burn it in, or that they have it on them in close combat, or you can burn it with another ability like stunned. It's useful. You just have to. I guess a lot of things with the Spanish more than I think a lot of the other factions, you really have to be thinking 2-3 moves ahead.
Yeah, I would agree with that. A lot of abilities that put fatigue on the enemy are more defensive in nature, it seems, and they're in the driver's seat and can kind of react to it, where there aren't a lot of abilities on your turn where you can put fatigue on something and then immediately follow it up. Any ability like that is very, very good, and so there's no, like, you don't have to roll to hit with that shooting attack and hit. Like, this is just automatic for 1 common. Once you get in range, you let it go. So you do need a dice to activate that unit, so it's kind of a 2 dice combo, but I think it's very good. Especially going against Hearthguard, something like that. That's a great ability, especially for a common. So, all right.
No, it's got plenty of applications.
Okay. I will do Reconquista. This is an orders ability using a uncommon. Until the end of the turn, your units equipped with javelins may not activate to shoot, but get 2 bonus attack dice during every melee. So the horns have sounded, the banners are waving. It's time to go in. Enough messing around. Obviously, if you have a lot of charges planned, it's worth it. Do you? Yeah, but you're losing all your shooting, man. it's just the javelin. So this is one where the bows and crossbow guys could still shoot. And then interestingly, your levy with javelins on foot would also get bonus attack dice going in, which I think is kind of interesting.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It seems like a late game kind of a type of ability here, or what circumstances are you popping this bad boy?
Yeah, I mean, basically, where this is really going to give you the most bang for your buck, I think, is when you've got a situation where you have multiple units of jinetes that can charge in and, do damage, and especially when they're too small to do much damage via shooting. So if you've got, especially at the end of the game where you've got units that have like four figures or 3 figures or 2 figures in them, charging in with, 4 or 5 dice with a +1 bonus to them, that might be enough to finish off an enemy hero or an enemy Hearthguard unit, or take one of their larger units down below the point where they're generating saga dice or something like that. Plenty of applications there, but you have to spend the die for this one, and then you also have to have enough dice to be able to, execute the charges with your units.
Yeah.
It's a fun one.
Yeah, so that's a good point, and we haven't even really discussed, but absolutely, all your warriors are great melee units. On your turn with that +1 to hit. Between all the fatigues out there, there's definitely some auto hit potential going up against folks if you are so inclined. And that's interesting that you still, I think some people would say the warriors are good enough for like combat potential. So, but you still like to use a separate Hearthguard unit, which is just more melee oriented.
Yeah. Well, I'll get to that in a moment. Okay. I actually don't use Hearthguard in my list. Okay. I use my warlord with lifeguards as one striking unit, and then I use a unit of Western Knights as my other striking unit.
Okay.
So sort of a better, look at it sort of a better value, I guess. But again, we'll come to that in a moment. But yeah, this ability in particular is one of the things that really motivates you to just take a lot of jinetes. I mean, that's why it's at 3 points in the list, because you can have a lot of smaller units charging in with this ability.
So, okay.
Yeah,
it's a good one. Orders. Just remember to use it. Make sure you spend that dice before you start moving. I'm not gonna let you take it back, Chris. You activated. I'm sorry, you gotta wait.
The Spanish only have 2 orders abilities. Well, two. So there's not a whole too much to remember compared to some of the other ones. But
and I think I'm bringing it up because I think playing Age of Magic, most of the boards have some orders abilities that they sound a lot like melee or other kinds of abilities. And just because they wanted to be able to use them with monsters or something like that. So it's not, we're running into that a lot in our games. We got new people learning Age of Magic as well. So we've been getting lots of take backs on our orders abilities as we go through the Age of Magic games. But just something to keep in mind. So Chaos, I like this ability. This is insane. Chris, lead us through it.
Yes, it is. So Chaos, it's an orders reaction ability. It costs 1 rare die. So you choose a warband and take all its fatigues.
Take them.
Take them. Just take all the fatigues from one warband. Redistribute these fatigues throughout the warband, giving each unit a maximum of 2 fatigues. Any fatigues which cannot be placed according to the above rules are discarded. So, so again, choose a warband. So this can be your warband or it can be your opponent's warband. basically what the two applications are, you can reshuffle the ability on, you can reshuffle the fatigue on your warband. So let's say your warlord is exhausted at the end of your turn. You can, in your opponent's turn, because this is order's reaction, in your opponent's turn, you can take his fatigues and then drop them off on other units that are towards the rear and, aren't in immediate danger. And then your warlord's still fresh and, ready to potentially take a charge from an enemy if necessary. So that's great. The other application is more offensive, and you can, again, reshuffle the fatigues on your opponent's warband, and for example, drop 3 fatigues and exhaust one of their key units or their warlord or something like that. So just basically, if played well, you can either save a couple of your key units in your opponent's turn, or you can neuter a couple of their important units. Mm-hmm. So if used in the right circumstances, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sorry. You couldn't exhaust. But you could give them 2 fatigues. So like you could cancel their activation or reduce their armor by 2 or increase. But still, a lot of fun you can have with this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So order's reaction. So after they've already allocated all their dice, you get to see which units, they're going warriors or Hearthguard. It's the same thing as the stunned, where they have to commit to something, and you, based off the board layout, are going to be able to figure out, hopefully, where they're going. So it's up to the opponent, just to seeing that you have this, they have to change what they're doing because they need multiple attack vectors to get at you. Now, I should point out that your javelin Hinetes are armor 3 versus melee and shooting. So if they could just get in, you're pretty juicy targets. But this ability, this is tough. I'm curious, how often do you use this on yourself versus the opponent?
And does it? I think it's pretty situational. I would say if my opponent, I would say I use this on myself more than on my opponent, based on my, experience so far, just because, especially when I'm using my warlord as one of my main striking units, and he's potentially further forward than, he's potentially far enough forward that he could be vulnerable, especially if he's exhausted. This allows me to just get rid of the fatigues on him, shuffle him off to other units, and it's going to be much harder to take him out.
Sure. Yeah, I can definitely see that, especially like if you do have stunned up, that's already disrupting their plans. You have Battle Weary, Iberia, those can also disrupt their plan. This is just more disruption type stuff. Yeah. So when you use it on your guys, that's something that it's bringing something different to the board versus just pure disruption. So with the single rare die, there's one other ability we're about to get to. Why don't we do that one, and then we'll talk about which of these abilities gets your rare die or favored. So I will do Treachery, which is the next one down. Sure. It's a common and a rare dice. This is a melee ability, defender only, if the enemy unit has at least 1 fatigue and your unit has none. So there's lots of ways for you to get that fatigue on there, but your unit has none. Your adversary must discard all their attack dice. No attack dice for you. It is
they can always get more through
correct. It's the order type thing here. So you wait. It's tough. Seeing you have that there, your opponent is probably going to be reluctant to use some abilities, which might be a win in and of itself. So they could always correct. You pop it, and then they can add like 2 or 4 attack dice, with certain abilities or something like that. So Another total shutdown here, at least for one attack. Must be the defender. There's quite a few qualifications here. So defender, they have at least one fatigue, and you have none. So depending what's going on, they might be able to work their way around it to where you cannot use this potentially, and then on your turn, it's not much use. So. So thoughts about this one? I guess I would say this is probably not going to be my number one for the rare. I'm thinking here.
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if I've ever used this one.
Okay, yeah, it's 2 dice too. So compared to everything else you got going on,
it's 2 dice, and they're 2 dice, and it's very situational because you have to have the dice to spend on it, and you have to be able to afford to plop a common and a rare on that ability. You have to have a situation where one of your units is about to get charged by the opponent, and you have to have no fatigues, and your opponent has to have fatigues.
Yeah.
So potentially this could work. You could pop this right after your opponent's burned your fatigue to lower your armor. That could be fun. They start in attack dice, say and you know what? I'm gonna pop your. I'm gonna reduce your warlord's armor to 4, and then you just counter with this and say, well, okay. Treachery, you get no attack dice. So that could work. Or a speed bump, or a speed bump unit of Jinetas, just 4 little guys getting charged by Hearthguard or Western Knights or something like that. Let's say the turn before they rode up, plopped a fatigue on them, and just stood there waiting to take the charge. Then they get charged. Your opponent has to discard their attack dice. They don't get to do anything to you unless they give themselves more attack dice somehow. You get to hit back, maybe kill one guy and force him to retreat. That could be fun. Yeah, that could work. The problem is still it's still expensive, and it's still very situational. So this isn't. You could find applications for it, but not one I would use very often.
Yeah. I think to me that is more powerful just having it on the board, because it changes what your opponent is doing, and if they know that they can't charge in because this ability is there, then that's kind of a win. Just having it, just preventing stuff from happening. So again, it's kind of disrupting your opponent. It's not doing anything different from the other disruptions we've talked about. It's 2 dice, so it's expensive. So for a rare, though, you kind of want it to be more actively being utilized versus just he's not going to do that 1 extra charge now against this other unit as an attack of opportunity kind of type thing, because he knows that he can't get it off with this or something like that. So
I think the only case in which I could see this being worthwhile is if you pop the dice on in like the first or second turn of the game, and you let it sit there for a few turns, maybe to like the late game where you're down to 5 or 4 saga dice, and it's not, the 2 dice aren't cutting into your limit, and then at the right time, you pop it, and your opponent has wasted one of their crucial attacks. So that it could be useful, but again, very situational.
Yeah, and that is true. The issue with the late game now, there's lots of fatigues all over on everything. But with chaos, you can actually make sure the unit you want to keep alive is going to come out with 0.
Also, yeah.
Again, it's a two rare dice. So between the rares, then. Are you more for stunned, just versus chaos?
I would say it would be stunned or chaos depending on the situation. Because stunned, you also a lot of times, especially if it's a key unit, you want to try and make sure that they've got 2 fatigues on them, so that even if your opponent takes one off because of a rest activation, then they're still not gonna be able to. You're still gonna be able to use this.
So yeah, the best combination is both chaos and stun to make sure whichever unit has the fatigue and then gets stunned. So
I mean, a few times where I've caught myself with stun that I was planning this. I was saying, okay, here this is. I'm gonna spring this on them, and I'm gonna laugh evilly, and they're gonna be, and they're gonna be pissed. And then they rested the unit with the ward. I'm like, can do that.
You can rest guys in this game.
No, but no, still, stun has plenty of applications there. But moving on. So treachery, I think we figured that one out. It has its applications. Again, I think it's one I need to play around with a bit more.
Sure.
I think pretty much every battle board has one ability that you only count on getting using maybe once per game.
Yeah.
If you use correct, it can really mix things up. So this is that ability for the Spanish.
Okay. Well, do you want to round us out with lances and javelins?
Sure. So lances and javelins. It's melee. You can only play this on a mounted unit, and it costs a common and an uncommon. You gain 2 defense dice for each friendly unit with javelins within M of the enemy unit. So basically, the idea here would be, let's say you take 2 small units of jinetes, charge them up to the enemy unit. They throw their javelins, maybe knock off a couple of casualties, maybe one of them uses Blazing Sun to pop a fatigue on you, and then you charge in with one of your strike units, let's say your Warlord. They get their attacks, and then they get 2 defense dice for each unit with javelin. So in this case, they get 4 extra defense dice.
Okay. Are they a friendly unit themselves? For some of those abilities, do they count as being within M of themselves?
I think that would count because it's not each friendly unit within M of your unit. It's each friendly unit within M of the enemy unit.
Okay.
So I would assume that includes the unit in question as well. So you could even do a charge of 3 units with 3 units of jinetes, and that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah,
but
that'd be cool. 6 defense dice. Pretty good. It's still two dice though. I could also see this being used. You just have your kind of battle line that's like maybe 13 inches away from the enemy, and you have 2 or 3 of these units sitting next to each other, and he's going to get in somewhere. So boom, he's hitting you on 3s, but you got 4 or 6 defense dice to kind of soak up whatever attack does happen to get through.
Could definitely work.
Maybe not a great use of 2 dice for just contingency purposes, but definitely something you could do.
It's for defense. It's potentially even 4 or 6 extra defense dice for common and uncommon. I'd say that's a bargain if you can pull it off.
Yeah, definitely. So, and there's not really much else going on as far as boosting your attacks. There's essentially nothing. You can soup up shooting a little bit. There's no. I mean, it all comes down to fatigue, and that's what you're going to use to increase your attack power or defensiveness is manipulating their fatigue. But sometimes you just want those actual defense dice, and this is where you're going to get them. So do you actually use the combat bonus for attack die? There isn't really any other way, or do you use that at all with this board band, or is just the fatigues manipulation get you through?
The combat bonus is always nice, especially if I have maybe give yourself 1 or 2. If I've got the dice, if I've got spare dice, then giving your crossbows 1 or 2 extra attack dice is always useful, especially if you're using something like Hidalgos, where you're
yes,
dropping their armor.
maximum.
Yeah,
1 extra guaranteed hit. That'll be.
that's not something I use consistently.
Okay, cool.
Or
well, we have made it through, and I guess one last comment about lances and javelins is you can get the levy with javelins, so they can't use this ability themselves because they're not a mounted unit, but they could be a friendly unit within medium. So
yeah, definitely.
I don't know. It doesn't sound like there's enough to use the levy javelins. Have you ever tried those guys out? I can't see.
Well,
much.
I only have crossbow levy, but I only have crossbow levy, but honestly, I don't know. I don't think I'm not terribly interested in trying out the javelin levy either, because I don't think I think having like a unit of crossbows that can just stay in place and just give you some area denial it's a better it's a better fit. It complements what the rest of the force does.
Yep, I agree. You already have dudes running around on horses with javelins that can use a lot of other abilities as well, much more effectively. So I don't really see them. Do you ever take the guys on foot for? Obviously, you can decide at deployment. So do you have foot warriors painted up in case of those scenario purposes?
Yeah, I do, because I used them in first edition. So first edition, I think I had 3 points of warriors, and half of them were jinetes, and then half of them were warriors on foot. And so I do have them painted up. Probably bring those out, especially if I was fighting something like pagan peoples who have infantry hopping around terrain. That's when I would. So.
Okay, so there might be some opportunity there, but for the most part, you kind of hinted at it when we were talking about Reconquista. So it sounds like you do utilize the mercenary options for these guys frequently. So are the lifeguard, are they like the loyal mercenaries, or
what?
How do those work?
So Hearthguard. So they're 2 Hearthguard models. They cost a point. They form a heroic unit with your warlord. And basically what they do, they either contribute attack dice, so 4 attack dice, or you can decide in close combat, you can decide for them to not generate attack dice, and then your warlord's resilience is increased by 1 for each lifeguard remaining on the board. So if you've got a complete intact unit, your warlord has got resilience 3 in close combat.
Very nice.
Pretty sweet.
So that is pretty sweet. If you want to max out your warriors, Hinitus, you're susceptible potentially then, if you don't have any Hearthguards, to getting singled out at various points. But the lifeguard, would be very difficult to take out that warlord. And you get some efficiency with your dice as compared to just having a Hearthguard unit standing around him. It sounds like you're getting a lot more flexibility.
You can also sacrifice the members of the unit, to cancel wounds as usual.
Yes.
So you've got in combat, you've got resilience 3, and then as a last result, you can also sacrifice the lifeguard. So it basically, especially if you're trying to make your warlord a proper assault unit, the lifeguards are really useful for doing that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Western Mercs. So our favorite heavily armored guys. They've been fact again as well. So they're limited to 1 activation per turn, I believe, is the hiccup with those guys now. So do you think you will continue to utilize those guys? Are they still worth it in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I've only gotten one game in with them since the FAQ hit. I think it's still going to be worth taking them. It's still going to depend a lot on what faction I'm fighting, of course. You're just going to have to be a lot more careful with deploying them, because you really need to, if you want to charge, you now need to make sure that your guys are positioned to be able to reach your opponent in, with the charge. So
correct. And just to confirm, so Iberia specifically says the Hinitus for like a movement, so you can't sneak out an extra movement on their turn. I don't think there's anything else.
Yeah. Iberia only works on Hinitus. I think in first edition it was for all mounted units.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that was the case as well. So
I mean, the thing is that I think what will make the Western Knights still worthwhile to play in the second edition, the maneuverability is an issue because you can't move and then charge in anymore. So you have to make sure you're positioned correctly. But on the upside, I mean, it's a point. I think they're still a much better value for money than 1 point's worth of Hearthguard, because you've got 8 models with that armor. So with 5 in armor 5 in close combat, 4 against shooting. So I'd say they're survivable against Hearthguard. They generate the same amount of attack dice if they're charged, and they generate more attack dice than Hearthguard if they charge themselves. So, okay. I mean, quite a lot of value there.
Yes, and if you put them in the middle of the board, it's going to be hard to avoid ending something within charge range of those guys. So,
I mean, I think that part of the issue now is, it used to be, like, when I've used them before, they were great for charging missile units. Not so much, because to charge in their turn, they're going to need to be positioned within range of the missile. You're going to have to deal with an entire turn of shooting before you get to charge in, unless you use something like stunned or something like that to prevent them from activating. But yeah.
Okay.
So,
any other mercs out there that you've given a whirl with the Spanish? Any synergies here?
One I do want to try out is the tribal hunters. Let me just open the book and bring up the rules for them real quick.
Yeah.
So,
while you're looking that up, I will point out the Hinitus ability and Reconquista are orders. And they're just units equipped with javelins. One is a mounted unit equipped with javelins. So any mercs could benefit from those rules if they're presumably equipped with javelins.
Yeah, for sure. And they'd have to be loyal. So you'd have to.
Since it's an orders ability, you wouldn't have to be loyal.
True.
Well, actually. Okay, so they wouldn't be able to act. I'm not sure about Hinitus. You can't activate mercenaries with advanced saga abilities. Orders is not actually activating them, or this Hinitus isn't actually activating them. So I would actually say both of those work without having to dig into anything else.
That's fair enough.
Something to consider. I'm not sure that if the mercs with javelins, they're not probably going to be adding anything different to your force necessarily, and I haven't even seen what's going on here. But anyways, to get back, so you're talking about the tribal hunters? Is that?
Yeah. So Spanish can take tribal hunters. I was checking that just to make sure that was definitely true. That I'm looking at them, but so they've got a couple of things that actually really. So, it'd be another missile unit, stick them in cover or move them around, just, provide some shooting support, always good. they've one of the abilities that's really cool is the coup de grace. And so you discard one of your opponent's fatigues to add +1 to all their attack dice. So that sort of fits in with the Spanish fatigue manipulation ethos. But so also, if they've got camouflage, so their armor against shooting is 5, well, reduced to 4 during their because they have bows. So if you're dealing with an opponent who's got lots of shooting, they're going to be more survivable. And then also they've got traps. So if someone charges you, you get to shoot them before they charge in. So that could be pretty fun.
Okay. Yeah. I think that could definitely be fun. Just kind of playing along the strengths of your board more than doing something different. Just hammering at what you're already doing.
Well, I think it would be good to have another infantry option just in case I'm fighting. Again, I'm thinking specifically pagan peoples because I've fought them before. It was just one of those. It was one of the most depressing games I've ever had. You've got a bunch of little infantry units hopping around terrain that you can't do anything to hurt because all you have is cavalry who, you're not going to do a lot of you're not going to do a lot of damage to them by shooting. You're just not.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a very depressing game. So maybe having some more infantry options when you're dealing with like pagan peoples or primarily infantry faction that uses terrain, it's always a good thing.
Yeah, I agree. Gotta have a plan for when you gotta go around that woods. So, okay, well, before we take off here, let's touch base on the legendary units real quick. Have you used any of these guys? We got El Cid and Garcia Ordonez. I'm not sure pronunciation. Never my strong point. You want to talk about El Cid there?
Yeah. I haven't used either the legendary Spanish, either of the legendary Spanish units. I think I probably will try them out at some point soon, though. El Cid has, for one thing, he dishes out a fatigue when he takes part in melee. So again, that fits in. That complements quite nicely with a lot of the other
fits in.
On the battle board. Yeah, so that could be fun. And the other thing that he does is that he can take 2 dice, two of your the saga dice you generate during the turn, and use them and take the Muslim dice instead of the Christian dice, and generate a separate orders phase with the Moorish battle board. So this is where the Moors have a couple of abilities that make up for what the Spanish really lack, which is sort of standalone buffing abilities, like extra defense dice or extra attack dice. Like wholehearted could be a lot of fun. So it's an and you get 2 attack dice for each of the enemy units' fatigues, or gain 2 and also gain 2 defense dice for each of the enemy units' fatigues. That complements quite nicely with the Spanish thing.
Yeah, that's really cool. I think anytime you can mix the battle boards, I think is really cool. I think there should be more of it.
Yeah, I think the main thing with these guys is that with both of these guys is that you are generating a point, and it does cost a point to recruit them, and that's you're reducing what options you have elsewhere. So it might be harder to take multiple units of Kinetes or something like that. Yeah,
especially tough in a 6-point game, but probably easier to swallow if you're playing like 8 points or something like that, which seems more themey, seems in line. So I'll talk about Garcia now. So he's same stats, warlord stats, basically. He does generate that extra saga dice, just like El Cid. He's a Grenadine mercenary, so his Hearthguard units can be equipped with javelins. So they're not Jinetes for those purposes. So Iberia they wouldn't be able to utilize, but I think essentially all the rest of the tricks that you normally use could also then work on your Hearthguard if you are so inclined to do so. And then he has Return to Favor. At the end of your activation phase, if the enemy warlord has at least one fatigue, you may exchange their fatigues for Garcia's. So if Garcia has 3 fatigues and the other guy has 1, that's probably a decent trade. So
yeah, definitely.
So you're gonna be kicking butt, but not fighting the enemy warlord. You'll be killing other stuff, and then at the end you swap that out. So
I mean, I think with both of these, if you choose either of them, you're basically deciding that your warlord is going to be your main striking unit, because you're going to need you're spending 2 points on the warlord, 3 points if you add lifeguard to him, and then you've got 3 points to spend on your jinetes or your crossbows or something like that. So that you're spending you're spending 2 points on the warlord effectively. So one point to recruit him and then another point to add lifeguards to him, for example. So you've got 4 points to play with. So you really have to commit to using that warlord well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So they're fine. Don't seem too crazy. Don't seem totally useless either on the other end of the spectrum. So okay.
I think Sid's the one that could be really fun.
Yeah, I think he's a little more straightforward to use overall, but cool. Well, this has been a marathon discussion of the Spanish here, Chris. I haven't done one this long for some time, so thank you for sticking around and helping out.
There's a lot. There's a lot to go over with these guys.
Yeah.
So.
Any last thoughts here about the Spanish before we call it?
I would say they're an incredibly fun faction. They are a really fun faction to play because, there's a lot of you can really mess with your opponent's battle plan.
Yeah.
You can do a lot of psychological warfare type stuff with them, but they got a really steep learning curve because there are very few sort of standalone effective abilities on the battlefield. You sort of have to figure out how the different abilities mesh with each other, and how to combine those and make them work together. So I'd say it's gonna, and they are listed as like one of the most difficult factions to learn in the rulebook. So a lot of fun, steep learning curve, but I'll say it again, they're a lot of fun.
Cool. Yeah, I think they definitely have the tools. You're definitely going to have some fun games, and good deal. Well, awesome. Do you what's your win record with these guys? Would you say? How do they stack up? Do you think?
I'd say, give or take, about 33% wins, 33% draws, 33% losses. Okay. So not.
It's even.
I'm still getting the hang of them. So.
Okay. Cool. Yeah. Well, that sounds fair. Sounds balanced. Kind of what we want here in a game of Saga. So awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to come on again, Chris. It was good chatting with you, and great to soak up all this knowledge you are providing here. Much appreciated. If you folks at home are using the Spanish and have any comments about anything that we said here or any additional insight, go ahead, post below in the comments. Much appreciated here. If you enjoyed the video, please share it with your pals. But otherwise, we are going to call it here for today. So thank you again, Chris. Oh, you have one last tidbit here?
If anybody's listening, especially over in Europe, me and Yannick have been, we finalized all the details for the Saga Polish Grand Melee. We're going to be putting the sign-up sheet. We're going to be putting the sign-up sheet up this weekend. So yeah, stay tuned for that.
Okay.
Start planning.
Is there?
Yeah.
Is there a date set for the Grand?
Yeah, it's the 7th, the 8th of September.
Okay,
so
cool. So this will probably go out sometime in August, just the way the editing and process goes and everything else. So, cool. Well, we will, be able to get it out in time. So, European folks, the Polish Grand Melee in September there. And how do folks, is there a Facebook page or a website you want to direct folks to?
Page, just look for Saga Polish Grand Melee 2019. Also, once I've got the sign up page up on Facebook, I'll be putting announcements up on like the English speaking Saga group, the Polish group, anywhere I can really. So yeah, it's again, keep on the watch, be on the lookout for that. And come along. It's going to be great.
All right. Yeah. That's awesome. You can have so many Grand Melees. The U.S., we just have one in Chicago once a year to go to, for official Grand Melees. In Europe, you could go to the German Grand Melee, the French Grand Melee, the Polish one, the U.K.
Everything, relatively close by.
Right, yeah. Definitely possible to drive. You got the mass transit systems. I'm not sure what those are about, but I've heard they're really cool. You don't have to drive everywhere yourself. So,
you could be 3 or 4 hours away by train or an hour or two away by plane. So, yeah. But anyways, that's not to prolong things too much, but yeah, that's happening. Polish Saga Grand Melee again.
Okay, cool. Well, yes. Thank you again. And good night. We will talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Good night. Cheers.
Saga.